Okay, everybody, welcome tonight. And thank everybody for coming to the Sierra Club, Ohio Chapter Miami Group, and this is the Miami Group of the Sierra Club. We welcome you tonight for our presentation. So I have the honor of talking about the our Green Cincinnati Plan, and I found, because I've been around for so long, I found this book from 2013. So the Green Cincinnati Plan is redone every 5 years, and it was first done in 2008. And Larry Falcon was working at the Office of Environment and Sustainability at that point, so he was in charge of that then. And it might have had a different name, did it, Larry? Did it have a different name then? Because it changed names a few times. The office.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one was in 2008, and I'm just going to read you a little bit of and then Nathan's here to tell us all about it. But it says in this brochure, in 2008, Cincinnati made history by adopting its first climate protection action plan, now known as the Green Cincinnati. That was 2008. Now we're in 2023, and Nathan Alley, who is an employee of the Sierra Club and on the steering committee for the Green Cincinnati Plan, is going to tell us all about what's in there. This was, it'd be interesting to compare it to 2008, 13, excuse me. But anyway, probably an exercise in futility. But Nathan is going to Nathan's going to take us through the current plan, which I'm sure he'll tell you this, but you have until the 9th of March to make comments. Is that correct, Nathan?
I'll walk through some public engagement possibilities.
Okay.
How's that?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. So I'm going to walk to where, so we are on Zoom, and I see Brad's on Zoom. Hi, Brad. And it's great to see you all. This is actually the first time I think I've spoken in person to the Miami group in probably 3 years, maybe. I've done a lot of Zooming with you all, but it's great to be here in person with those of you who are in the room. And I spoke to a room of about 200 people on Saturday at the University of Dayton. So this is going to feel a lot more comfortable and intimate as we go through what the program is tonight. So Barry has the Green Cincinnati Plan draft there up on the screen. I've got 3 objectives for the evening. The first objective is for folks who might not be familiar with the Green Cincinnati Plan either at all or with any great specificity. We're going to walk through what the plan is and sort of what it's intended to do. My second objective is for folks who have been following along, particularly with this 2023 update cycle. We're going to look at the most current draft that will be before the Planning Commission later this month and what changes may have been made. And where there are opportunities for us to engage further on the plan, where those might be. But then third, and probably most importantly at this point in time, what I really want to focus on are the suite of recommendations that are going to be contained in the plan, and where we as a Sierra Club and as individuals might help move them forward, help implement them over the next 5 years of this 2023 Green Cincinnati Plan. And so as we're going through the various recommendations in the draft plan, I really want you to be thinking about, this is something I might be interested in following up on. This is something that we as the Sierra Club are already working on that we need to be involved in. This is something where we should take a leadership role. And I'll talk a little bit more about what a leadership role might look like. But those are my 3 objectives for tonight. So hopefully you'll help me get to those. But I do want to be interactive. So anyone that wants to ask a question or weigh in, Larry is not probably the only expert in this room on the Green Cincinnati Plan. So if other folks have things that they want to share, questions or things that I say confuse you, don't hesitate to interrupt or ask questions. Fantastic. So I will admit I had a very, well, it wasn't a very cleaned up version of the plan that originally presented to you all. And I want to thank Ralph Rubin here, I don't believe, and I don't think he's on the Zoom right now, but I don't know where he got it. I didn't ask, but somehow he got me this pretty cleaned up version of the plan that's dated March 2nd. So it tracks all of the things that I had. It just looks a lot nicer. And this is what's going to be presented to the Planning Commission, I believe, in about 2 weeks. And then the plan is for City Council to take it up on, I believe, April 11th. So just in time for Earth Day. And then, you know, as I mentioned, then it will be on to the implementation phase in the next 5 years or so of the plan. Although, without getting into the weeds, you know, there have been discussions about it's a 5-year plan, but saying 2028 when 2030 is right there, and we already have some citywide goals attached to the year 2030. Do we try to, you know, cover that time period as well, and maybe do the next adoption or implementation phase to 2030? Anyway, none of that's been decided yet, but it's sort of like this background conversation. But for right now, let's just assume that this is the plan that's going to see us through the next 5 years. All right, so if you can just kind of scroll through, you don't really have to stop anywhere in particular right now, Barry, because what I'm ultimately going to want to have on the screen are the recommendations, which are buried pretty far down. So if you want to just kind of slowly scroll through it as I talk. The Green Cincinnati Plan, and Maria already covered this, but it was first adopted in 2008 as the city's climate action plan. One of the first of its kind for a major city, and really a strong step forward for the city and its sustainability department. Kudos to Larry and others for all of that hard work, and certainly the Sierra Club as well, because I know that folks were involved back then. And then, as Marie has mentioned, it gets updated every 5 years with new suites of recommendations. We check in to see where the recommendations that were adopted previously are. And every 5 years, there's a steering committee that's put together, and I had the honor of serving back in 2018 on the steering committee, and then again in this last year and going on into this year. There are, I believe, more than 30 of us now on the steering committee, which is tremendous because it's become very representative of the community, pulling from neighborhoods and organizations like ours, and then also private businesses and other folks that are major stakeholders within the city of Cincinnati. And so actually, it probably is still on down a couple pages, but you can see, and this will be all, of course, available online, but you'll be able to see a list at some point of the many steering committee members. And so we've had a number of meetings. The Office of Environment and Sustainability, which is currently being led by Director Ollie Croner, worked with Green Umbrella and other organizations to convene sort of task force meetings starting in last fall. Those groups met to cover the various chapters of the plan. So perfect, Barry, just pause there for half a second, because you can see there, actually it's probably difficult for you all to see, so I'll read through it. But the chapters of the 2023 plan will be outlined as follows: buildings and energy, okay, city operations, meaning specifically the city's own facilities and fleets, et cetera, community activation, food, mobility, the natural environment, resilience and climate adaptation, and then zero waste. And these same basic categories have tracked mostly from plan to plan, although the wording changes a little bit, things get added here and there or dropped. One thing that has evolved over the course of the plan are the pillars that it rests on. So initially, when the 2008 plan was adopted, it was a climate plan. It was just that, amazingly so. But then, Larry, if you can tell me exactly what year resilience was added in as another pillar of the plan, at least in 2018. And I think probably maybe in 2013, but at one point, resilience, how we adapt and deal with the climate change that we already know is bound to happen based upon our actions, that was added as a major pillar. And then this plan, and to a degree the last plan as well, have added equity as a third major pillar of the plan. And to that end, not only does the 2023 plan have a steering committee, but it has a completely separate equity committee that has tried to look at the plan both on a very line-by-line basis, but then also sort of as a whole to ensure that it is being centered in principles of equity, environmental justice, and prioritizing communities that have been adversely affected by things such as the early effects of climate change and other negative environmental consequences. So those are the three main pillars of the plan. We went through the chapters. If you actually can keep scrolling down, maybe until we get to the first, the buildings and energy section. the plan is organized by chapter, but then each of the chapters has goals and objectives, and then recommendations for how the city, as a city, might effectuate, implement, and meet those goals and objectives. And a lot of those are couched in terms of climate reduction, so carbon emissions reduction. Others are, in terms of, there's the food section, which we'll get to, and it talks about eliminating food deserts. So there are a number of different metrics within the plan, but the various recommendations are sort of where the meat of the plan lies. And in the 2018 plan, there were more than 80 such recommendations, which made it into the final product. And the Office of Environment and Sustainability has a very handy spreadsheet, which we can share as we've looked at it over the years, where they track each of the recommendations and their progress. And so, for example, last year, we were very happy and proud to be part of the effort to adopt what was called a complete streets policy of the city of Cincinnati. And that was a recommendation that came out of the 2018 plan, was for the city to take that step. And we got in right under the gun in terms of the 5-year plan cycle. But nonetheless, that was an example of a recommendation that was moved forward. Notably, however, these are recommendations. They're not proscriptions for the city. This is not the city saying we commit and promise you that we are going to do all these things, or even that we know how to do all these things. Rather, these are sort of aspirational goals and recommendations for how we might get there when they find capacity, funding, political will, et cetera, et cetera. So another example of a recommendation that you might say has moved forward and you might not, is the plastic bag ban, which was successfully adopted back in 2020 as a recommendation that came out of the Green Cincinnati Plan, but has never been implemented. So that is, they can sort of tick it off the box and also not, if you look at it from a certain perspective. So the plan is not an implementation plan. It is not a pledge by the government of the city of Cincinnati to do something. The way I like to frame it, especially for our organization in the Sierra Club, is it kind of gives us a roadmap for our advocacy over the next 5 years. It tells us these are things that the city is already interested in, has studied, put some value in, and if there is somebody, some entity or some group of folks that can sort of lead the charge to make them move forward, then they might happen. And so the two examples that I just used, the complete streets and the bag policy, neither of them would have happened without the Sierra Club and our other nonprofit, non-governmental organizational allies. And so they very much rely on folks like us to make the plan happen. To that end, in the various plans, at least dating back to the last plan, I think several more, various champions are identified, right? So organizations, individuals, groups like the Sierra Club that might be responsible or help the city move recommendations forward. We have been the champion in the past for various recommendations. Admittedly, and this is not an indictment on anybody, but I don't know that anyone ever really knew exactly what the parameters of that were, whether it was us or the city or anybody. It kind of was a case-by-case basis for the various plan champions. And my understanding is that's been acknowledged, and moving forward, there's going to be a more formal process, not onerous, but a more formal process for identifying champions for the plan that might help move the recommendations forward. Things where an organization would actually sign up for something, and actually there would be a little bit more of a meeting in the minds. So again, as we're going to look through these recommendations, what I want us to think about, where might the Sierra Club fit in as a champion? We don't have to be alone in that effort. We might partner with other organizations. Certainly we might partner with the city and their various departments. But what might we do to be additive for this effort? Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay, let's roll. Let's go to the buildings and energy chapter. And as you might imagine, this is very much, you can scroll down. You can go down to, actually go back up one more, sorry. So the vision of each chapter sort of, is a very 3,000 foot level goal, but you can see there, if you squint, adoption of clean energy sources, energy efficiency measures by 2050 that result in net zero emissions from buildings, contributing to a healthy, equitable, and resilient future for our city. So There's a chart in here, but I don't need to make Barry find it, but key takeaway is that within the city of Cincinnati and our 52 neighborhoods, buildings account for the vast majority of our climate change causing emissions. Transportation is huge, but the building sector is the biggest contributor. And so focusing on reducing energy consumption from our buildings, making them more energy efficient, is a sort of both low-hanging fruit and high-level goal for the plan. And again, this is a very key goal that by 2050, we want our buildings to be net zero in terms of their emissions. That's relatively ambitious, and it's more ambitious than the last plan. So if you go down, and Barry, I appreciate you doing all this. Okay, so there's the goal number one, reduce building emissions 30% from 2 years ago by 2030. And this fits in nicely with the Green Umbrella 2030 district, which voluntarily signs up buildings. The city of Cincinnati itself is a member of this. The goal of that program is to reduce emissions. Actually, it's consumption. It's to reduce energy consumption, water consumption, and then transportation emissions by 50% by 2030. And so various buildings and landowners and the government have signed up to try to meet this goal. So it fits right in with the plan. You can keep going down. Thank you. So this leads us to our first set of priority actions. So these are the recommendations that would theoretically make that goal happen. Improve building performance by implementing policies like benchmarking, building performance standards, partner with local organizations to offer financing tools to support renewable energy development and energy efficiency programs, and then incentivizing existing buildings to essentially clean up and retrofit their operations. I know that some of our members have been interested in particularly that middle piece before, which is helping other community organizations and small groups achieve energy efficiency and renewable energy goals. And so that might be something we as Sierra Club and our various members interact with a lot of other groups throughout town that don't always have direct access to these ideas. And so if we can help with that, that's excellent. From a wonky policy standpoint, I'm very much behind the first bullet, but we don't need to focus on that one right now, but we will get benchmarking someday, I promise you. I don't know if Larry agrees with me, but I think we will. All right, so if you can go down. This is another goal. So here's just something I want to flag for anyone who was familiar with the last draft of the plan that we went over back in, was it late January, I think. This number to electrify 20,000 households by 2030, I believe, has jumped up from that draft. I believe that's an increase in the goal, which is a positive thing. As you might know, electrification, many people believe, is one of the primary keys to resolving the climate crisis in terms of not only vehicles, of course, but your home and any operations that can electrify. In fact, the state of Ohio has been implementing the federal, I don't want to get into the weeds too far, but you might remember when Volkswagen had their cheating, the emissions cheating scandal. Then they pointed out a bunch of money in the federal settlement. In Ohio, most of that money has gone to electrification of actually primarily like port operations and major freight operations. So that in and of itself was the biggest contributor to a lot of these problems, but electrification is key. So that's something that we can do. Now the Ohio legislature tries to make it difficult for us as a city to require things like electrification. So we have to go with incentives and education and sort of voluntary goals. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yes.
That's me.
Yes.
Even going back to the plastic bag ban and the state preempted that. How are you gonna, you're already saying the legislatures, they don't want to let us do this. We don't, how are we addressing that? We live in such an undemocratic society. I'm sorry to say, our government is not working for us.
So we're fighting a battle against the legislature. It's true. I will go on this brief detour because I also help facilitate our statewide legislative committee and help with all of our work at the State House. And that's what I was talking about on Saturday to an audience. And yes, the State House has not even slowly, pretty rapidly over time eroded our opportunities for things like renewables and energy efficiency. So we need to obviously keep that from happening more, not that getting worse. But there's some room for optimism because last year we had about 18 or 20 bills that we were following in the State House that we either supported or opposed. And believe it or not, the majority of them broke our way. Not necessarily because of our advocacy, many of them were just so bad that even the folks in the State House understood that, but there's some optimism. And there's some things that we might try to move this session of the legislature that didn't move last session that would make some of these plan goals a lot easier. For example, community solar is something that's not currently really authorized in the state of Ohio. It's difficult to go in on a combined renewables project that needs authorization from the legislature. We were, I want to say, pretty close at the end of last year. It didn't move, but we're hoping it might come back. So, okay, that was my legislative detour. We do have, if you email me, I can get you on our email list where I send as many updates as I can about what's going on in the State House in terms of our, yes, Marie, is that helpful?
Well, yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion. We just have to get new people elected.
Yes.
I mean,
That's the,
I realize that won't not an overnight fix, but I do think that we need to get people elected who are concerned about the things that, and wherever, because we're just going nowhere with the people that are in the state.
so plug for our Miami Group Political Committee, which will be interviewing candidates for Cincinnati City Council very soon. And so if people want, to be involved in that process, I'm sure that they would always love help. We're back to the 2-year election cycle in the city of Cincinnati. So the folks who adopt this plan in April may not be the people that see it implemented even next year, unless they get reelected. And I will say, I actually met with our political committee last week, and I do have confidence or some optimism, at least, that this council is invested in this plan and seeing it succeed and seeing it be implemented. Some of the folks that got elected for the first time year and a half ago, have proven to be, very friendly. And they have now, for the first time ever, a climate committee. It's climate, environment, and infrastructure. Climate's the first word in the committee. And so there's tremendous opportunity to do some of the things in this plan with the political capital that we're kind of trying to accrue here. Okay, so you can see there that some of the recommendations are about, again, electrification, trying to reduce the reliance on natural gas, create incentives for developers to make new buildings more energy efficient. Fortunately, our state Board of Building Standards is poised to adopt a new commercial building code later this month, which will take it up to the 2021 international model code standards for energy efficiency, which is amazing. And so Ohio will be kind of into the 21st century now. So that's a good thing, because we can't do a lot at the city level to do building code work other than incentivize it. But the state actually is moving, contrary to the legislature, some of our agencies actually do good things from time to time. Okay, so moving on. Again, I appreciate your help, Mary. Okay, so this is a really important one, and we certainly asked, for this to be more aggressive and ambitious. I would say if there's one sort of complaint or criticism that the Sierra Club might have about this plan, is that we would love to see it be bigger and bolder and more ambitious, and some of these numbers be bigger and some of the timelines be shorter. And we've made that known, and I think we've actually seen some movement on that front. We had to remind folks that they had already signed up for our 2035 Ready for 100 pledge, which took the city towards being 100% renewable by 2035. Originally, this draft was at 2050, and I said, no. We've already committed to 2035. Let's not backslide. So this is an important one. This is reducing the number of households experiencing energy poverty by a one might say modest 10% by 2028. I'm sure it's not going to be the easiest thing to do, but we'd certainly like to see that number even, be higher in the implementation of it. So
What is energy poverty?
my understanding, well, here, actually, let's just read it so I'm not going contrary to the plan. Energy poverty occurs when more than 6% of a household's income is spent on utilities. I wouldn't have had that bright line for you, so I'm glad it's written right there. But it's, basically about the percentage of your household income spent on energy. Thanks, Barry. Okay, so this is important, and these are the strategies to try to achieve that. I don't think, and this is not an indictment, but I don't think there's anything very new here. You'll see, like right up top there, it's grow and expand programs such as Warm Up Cincy to support low-income renters and multifamily housing, et cetera. And so this is not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but it's important to reaffirm, I think, the commitment to these programs, and I think they've had some success as they've been implemented. When did Warm Up Cincy start, Larry? Do you know? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you were probably there when it happened.
I don't remember exactly when it started, but it was after the 2018.
Yeah, okay. I know Carla was really involved with that, Carla Walker. Okay, moving on then. And I realize I'm probably going a little too slow right now, so I'm gonna try to speed us up just a little bit as we go through the plan. Okay, so obtain 40% of electricity from clean energy sources by 2030. That pretty much speaks for itself. Of course, the city has its solar farm that it is seeking to grow, and right now that farm, I believe, already manages most, if not all, of the city's operations, besides waterworks and the Metropolitan Sewer District, which are obviously huge. And then it's going a little ways towards sort of the aggregation.
Where is that farm?
Highland County, right?
Okay,
Highland
what
County?
about the one that Cranley talked about putting down at Lucan Airport? That was a big discussion. That there was a lot of discussion that there would be a big solar farm there. Do you remember this discussion?
I do. It was part of the portfolio, and Larry, do you have an answer for that? Again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you're shaking your head.
So, basically the airport location didn't work primarily because it's in the floodplain.
Okay,
And so it is the same proposal, but at a different location. The idea of building a big solar farm to meet city government's energy needs. But we basically took bids on what providers could give us solar panels at what price to meet the load. And it turned out that the economics worked best if you went where land is cheap.
Yeah, that makes sense. So no solar farm in Lunkin, primarily because of the floodplain issue, not necessarily FAA issues. But it's hopefully we'll go somewhere else. Carol, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Does the solar farm have to be within the city limits?
No, Highland County is nowhere near us.
Okay.
So
But I mean,
So the way, the goal was, I believe, to maximize the production on city land, wherever that was possible. And that was one of the major chunks of land that was identified as a possibility.
they're not gonna require it to be within the city.
No, because the vast majority is gonna come from the farm, which is out in Highland County, and I didn't flip, the mechanism through which we get that power is called a power purchase agreement, a PPA. And I don't even know what the economics look like right now, but back when the city signed the purchase agreement for that clean energy, it was at a savings based on its previous contract. So it was a win-win all the way around scenario. And I believe that's only, probably gotten better as time goes on. Okay, thanks, Greg. Thanks for the questions, everybody. Those are good questions. Okay, yeah, so there we go. Some of the recommendations there are talking about the power purchase agreement. But then it also talks about, again, helping organizations and individuals adopt rooftop solar where that's possible. It would be great if the legislation would help us out and make that even easier. Until they do that, we're a little bit challenged, but that's important. And so I know the Sierra Club in the past has held educational events where people can come and learn about, residential solar, rooftop solar, and if you're interested and have the capacity, how you might go about it, and what the benefits might be. So I know that people might be interested in that. Yes,
Interested in
Yeah.
wind power, how that might roll out in this area, even on an individual basis. Do you have any information about that?
So I know that there are individual wind units, but my numbers are probably off. At one point, I want to say it was like still need about 30 acres to make it. Anyway, the problem in Ohio, before getting ahead of myself, the problem in Ohio,
Legislature passed it.
legislature setback makes it almost impossible. It's, you know, that is where we are.
What about for an individual, one person home to have some wind backup for solar?
I'm not as familiar with the state of
Wondered if-
residential wind right now. Again, I've seen it more in a rural context.
Okay, thank you. That's enough.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Kathy.
David, maybe you could mention the church that we're in.
Absolutely. So sometime probably after the plan, I don't know if it, I know the church that we were in, Mount Albert Presbyterian Church, where we've had offices rented out for several years now, installed solar panels on their roof. What, 3-4 years ago, Marie?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, so it's, that was really exciting when it happened, and in fact, there was a documentary filmmaker who was working with the Sierra Club and others, and I think she interviewed people and took some footage of the installation up on the roof, and I think it was part of the documentary that she ultimately produced, but that was really exciting, and as I understand it, one of the great things about it was a somewhat longer time horizon where you were going to get your money recouped in your savings.
That's correct.
So it was an investment in sustainability, right? Eventually the church will recoup in savings, but you had that forward thinking, you know, commitment to making the change happen. So kudos to you on that. And yes, the more that the city can do to facilitate that, and so that's where I say, you know, just sort of proselytizing, I use that word specifically, or spreading the word to a congregation that you might be part of, or any other sort of institutional group that you might be part of that might have the capacity to go solar, but might not be thinking about it.
I think the church has 100 panels. That sounds right, Anna? Sorry. Doesn't the church have 100 solar panels on its roof? 100, yeah. So,
Awesome.
yeah, take a step back. Yeah. Probably have to step back during the day. But you can see them.
Do we know, do you know, or is it known that what percentage of buildings that the city owns, including MSD and Waterworks, that could have panels on it?
I don't know the percentage, but I know that there is possibility there and opportunity, especially in some of those larger entities that you mentioned. Also Metro, even though that's not the city necessarily, but there's a lot of, you know, garages and bus stops, things like that. So I know that there is an inventory of that. And I know that that was part of the plan as it was looked at. But I don't know if there's a specific implementation plan for putting the rooftop solar on those city buildings, but I know it's been identified, and I know that, you know, I think that's the long-term goal. Is that consistent with what other people are? Okay. So this next, thank you for the question. The next chapter is on city operations. I think we'll kind of breeze through this in the interest of time, because this really is more about, you know, what the city will do internally. But there are some, I think, important things to note about energy efficiency. So if you could go down, yeah, okay. So this is an important one. Something that you may or may not be familiar with: Center Justice 40 in the city budget, and ensure that at least 40% of spending benefits priority communities. So Justice 40, I believe, comes from the federal government, but it's essentially a mandate or a goal to spend at least 40% of your budget in communities that have been ignored. And so the plan calls them priority communities, but it's basically trying to put the money where the money has not flowed before and where it's absolutely needed. And so I think everyone would like to see even probably more than 40%, but that is a sort of broad goal that many communities have adopted and that the city will, use as a floor for its own activities. So that's very important from an equity standpoint. Again, let's kind of roll through these. If anyone's interested, we can always come back to it later, but let's just go to the next chapter because here we go, transportation. So this is another one that the draft that we saw back in January, this is slightly better. For instance, I think it had originally 250 electric vehicles in the city fleet, and now it's 400. But this is about greening the city's fleet itself, making sure that employees have access to sustainable transportation. Excuse me, starting to talk myself dry here. If you can go down. So there's a lot of attention being paid in the transportation section to ensuring that things are electric vehicle ready. That not only do people have the opportunity to own or share or whatever an electric vehicle, but then you have an opportunity to charge it. And so that's a big one. Certainly, going back up to the transportation, but there are goals about adding lane miles of bicycle amenities or walking amenities or other amenities for folks that are mobility challenged. So that's very important. This is let's see, where are we at? Community activation and advocacy. So this is another one where, certainly we have expertise in community activation and advocacy. But I think what this is really getting at in part is not having it be an every 5-year Green Cincinnati Plan update cycle, but rather a constantly living process where people don't kind of drift in and out every 4 or 5 years, but rather we're looking at these things all the time and in concert with other things that the city is doing, such as trying to address the affordable housing crisis, the need for green infrastructure and other things. Yes, Kathy.
How does this plan of Green Cincinnati, which is Cincinnati is actually a small footprint, connect with the Hamilton County Commissioners,
Well,
which also have many of these same buildings and roads and people moving around?
sure. I guess the short answer is it doesn't really, because they certainly don't have, they don't have the authority to even adopt a recommendation for the county. That being said, I know that the Green Cincinnati Plan has been used as a model or a reference for other cities, and I think for Hamilton County as well, in terms of actions that can be taken for local governments to be more sustainable. And so from that standpoint, where it talks about working with partners and allies, I think that includes other jurisdictions as well. We're involved in the conversation about the Brent Spence Bridge right now, and certainly the city of Covington is a key player in that conversation, not just city of Cincinnati. Okay, so one thing that I did note about the advocacy section, sorry. Never mind. Or you can keep going down. Sorry, Rick. I've looked at so many versions of this document that sometimes swims through my brain a little bit. So this is still a part of the community activation section. Advocacy and education are sort of the two subsections. But here's a really important goal: 100% of public schools have safe and accessible outdoor learning spaces by 2028. And that's something where certainly, at least individually, folks with families can get involved in those conversations with CPS and others. That's another sort of example where the city might not have direct control over something, but it can at least help facilitate or coordinate things. And that talking more about how the schools can continue to do things. All right, so one of the things that the plan identifies up top is a series of sort of cross-cutting themes. And apparently one of the biggest things that made it through the public comment process was the importance of job creation. And so in this education section, you see one of the goals is training at least 4,000 individuals for jobs in the green economy. There are already some organizations in the area that do things like this and do it very well. But supporting them and having the city be involved would be excellent. I think this is an area where some of our members were particularly interested in helping out or encouraging the city to do more. If you could go down. Talks there just about how to maybe work on that. We have a program that has been run here in the Cincinnati area, in Miami Group area for years, called Inspiring Connections Outdoors. And over the years, it's focused on different things, but we're going to be seeking to grow that program in the next several years. And one of the ways to grow that program might be through not just educational programs, but also specifically workforce training for youth. Okay, so priority actions. Okay, you can keep on going. Thank you. Here's a great one, and this really talks about, sort of keeping the Green Cincinnati Plan process going, and this is, identifying sort of the next cohort of the steering committee and who will help update the plan the next time it comes around, and making sure that that's not their first time interacting with the plan, but that they've got some experience and lived-in experience with it between now and then. And again, we can help with that, certainly. You can probably just keep going. Thank you. Here's a one that I know a lot of people are interested in, the food chapter. So here the primary goals as you go down are going to be increasing access to locally and sustainably grown food and supporting those who grow that food locally and sustainably, providing more opportunities to do that. And then it also talks about providing, more food and better food to people who live in what we call food deserts. And then on the other end of it, eliminating food waste from the landfill through composting and other activities. So those are some of the overarching goals of the food section. And I know we have a lot of folks that are specifically interested in these things. So increasing local food consumption, distribution and production, utilizing our regional agricultural system. Go ahead and go on. So here is where I know we had some comments. So back when we met in January, we put together just a long document of our members' comments on the draft plan. And I know that at least several people commented on the need for funding for neighborhood gardens and urban agriculture managers. And so that's certainly a priority within the plan. One thing that has been an ongoing process is restoring and adapting underutilized spaces such as vacant lots for food production or composting or both. So these are good goals in the plan. I don't need to turn my back here. I just want to make sure I see questions if there are any. Here's why I referenced the food desert problem, having access to healthy and affordable food within a walkable distance of your community. And this goal to essentially eliminate that problem throughout the 52 neighborhoods. And so that's certainly a laudable goal. I'm less familiar with the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, I will admit. So if anyone wants to do a deep dive on that, we'll do that later. So someone like Bob Park might be a little more familiar with that. And if folks are interested, we can always follow up. Here's an important one, although we certainly advocated for a higher or more ambitious goal there, but this is to decrease food going to the landfill by 50% by the year 2030. Certainly we want to be doing that, but it would be nicer to even have a greater decrease and even faster. So anything we can do to help that would be certainly welcome, I think. And that's the other thing, I guess, to note about the plan. Again, they're not prescriptions, they're recommendations. And the recommendations are very informal in that if we can do it faster or more ambitiously, it's not like the plan is going to keep us from doing that, right? If anything, it will help us facilitate that. So we can try to be more ambitious, even if the plan locks in certain goals. This is talking about increasing jobs in the agriculture and food sectors. Let's just keep on going. Okay, mobility. This is the transportation section essentially. If you go down, there's a number of things that the city has been doing to improve in this area, and so there's a lot of work to build upon. But there's also some really major decision points coming up. I mentioned the Runstance Bridge. We've got the Western Hills Viaduct project. And then, you know, there's several different bus rapid transit routes that Metro is going to be opening up over the next several years. So there's a lot going on in this space that the city can do to support. If you might just scroll down. So we do want to, you know, goals such as increasing the use of public transit. Just keep scrolling down. Increasing the utilization of zero emission vehicles, including electric vehicles, not just by the city fleet, but by individuals, businesses, et cetera. Go ahead. Increasing the number of lane miles for bicycle, pedestrian, and other infrastructure for folks that are not car dependent. And again, you know, it'd be great to see even more ambitious goals, but that I think is well on track. All right, go ahead. Okay, so this is another area that's sort of new. This is the Connected Communities program. So there has been a renewed focus on land use policy with this current council, and they're embarking currently on the Connected Communities project, which looks at historic land use regulation within the city and how it might be improved to help create more dense, walkable communities that better manage stormwater and provide people with opportunities to grow local food, et cetera. And so I believe there are ongoing meetings within the neighborhoods on this topic. If you look up the Connected Communities program, there's an opportunity to engage right now and potentially be a big part of that conversation, which is very important.
Is that where they were kind of trying to allow people to turn a garage into like an efficiency apartment, and that would be allowed in the zoning? Is that part of this conversation?
That's part of the conversation. So there are a number of land use policies that are being looked at right now, including, as you just alluded to, the accessory dwelling unit or ADU policy, which would essentially legalize in-law units as they've been known, right? Second units on a property that are usually occupied by someone who's at least close to the property owner, if not related. But also making those available potentially for rent once they are either built or made legal. Another part of that conversation is with the residential tax abatement program. What do we want as a city to give tax abatements for in order to incentivize certain things? So right now, a key, really the core of the residential tax abatement program is all about sustainability and energy efficiency and building it up to like LEED standards. But the proposals that are currently on the table would really shift the focus to other priorities. And so some of us have talked about wanting to ensure that we don't lose sight of the sustainability goals with that program. But Kathy, getting into the weeds, there are a number of conversations happening right now around the connected communities and land use topic that really would be good for people to see.
I think people are going to want to have that, and they're going to want it so much they're going to be willing to do pervious parking spaces.
Yep.
Solar paneling, extensive insulation. I mean, I think it's the perfect opportunity because you can generate rent from somebody, and then that place to rent will be less expensive to live in.
There you go.
I think I hope they get that through.
Maria, is any of this on our agenda for the Conservation Committee on Wednesday?
No.
Okay. But we can follow up with it at another point because I'm very interested in this conversation, and I know that other folks are too. So the next area, we've got natural environment, and then there's resilience. Natural environment is all about just that, preserving water and air quality, et cetera. Obviously, that's our bread and butter as the Sierra Club, and so we'd love to see these goals get beefed up if possible, but certainly if you can just go ahead and cycle them down to them. This is where we talk about expanding the urban tree canopy. and focusing on those priority communities that currently suffer the urban heat island effect, et cetera. And so not just expanding the urban tree canopy, but targeting that expansion where possible in the places that need it most. Not to ignore other places, better everywhere if possible, but in terms of putting resources towards the issue. And improving air quality. And these are probably some areas where the plan is a little squishier, right? Some of the recommendations are a little broader, and the goals are a little bigger, but certainly important to have in there.
Excuse me,
Yes.
wasn't rights of nature originally part of this green plan at one time? It seems to me I saw that on there and now.
So we submitted comments to that effect. I know our members were interested in that. I don't, and someone else can correct me if I'm wrong, if they know better, but I don't remember ever seeing the rights of nature in the Green Cincinnati Plan. It's a very interesting topic that we probably don't have time to get into at the moment, but it's also a bit of a third rail for like local government leaders. So if it gets into the plan, that would be awesome. I would also be surprised, but that's something that we have suggested.
Well, I mean, it's, I know people think it's, wow, that's weird, but you give corporations the rights of a person. I'm not. Unfortunately, our government just isn't working well, and we've got to be creative in our ways of making it work for us.
Absolutely. Yes, no, absolutely. I know that folks are very interested in the rights of nature conversation. I know Jean Nightingale has been very involved in that, and so I'm sure it will
Speaker
come back up.
here
Yeah.
several months ago.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so this is an important one, increasing access to green space. And it says so that every resident has at least a half-mile or less walk to a green space within the city or nearby. That's important.
Unfortunately, the city almost has that, but these green spaces are half an acre or a quarter of an acre.
Right.
Not really green spaces, they're a little bit of grass.
And sometimes it might be close but hard to get to, and that's where the mobility conversation kind of comes back in. Oh, I did want to just in that last one really quickly highlight just the I will go down one more. I'm so sorry. Yeah, yeah, gotcha. Thank you. That's perfect. I know again that some folks were interested specifically in promoting the use of green infrastructure in reforestation. And so those are certainly in the plan, although again, at a somewhat broader level, but certainly they're in there. Thank you, Barry. Appreciate it.
Question.
Yes. Oh, thanks.
I just said the biggest problem we have is finding politicians that are pro-green and pro-tax cut at the same time, because the tax cut is the driving force in our politics almost all the way.
Well, we've had some interesting discussions about how you could use tax incentives to accomplish some of these goals. Ralph Brueggemann would probably be very happy to talk to you about that. But that is a good conversation, and I know we submitted some comments to that effect. How we could use income tax or property tax incentives to better effectuate some of these things. And of course, that is exactly what the residential tax abatement program is. It's abating the property tax in order to achieve certain goals. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Barry. You can keep going now. So the final chapter, I believe, is resilience and adaptation. And here again, green infrastructure plays a huge role. And I know folks were interested in sort of digging into the specifics of that. And so there are specific recommendations in here about using vegetated swales and other stormwater capture devices that are natural and green to better manage our stormwater problems here and other issues related to MSD, et cetera. And so here's a goal. It's a little squishy, but complete 25 green infrastructure projects in the next 5 years, specifically in vulnerable and priority communities. And so I know that folks sort of were commenting that while that's a good goal, it would be nice to be a little more specific about that. But I don't think we got that in this draft of the plan. But nonetheless, good that it's in there. And again, you know, complete 5 climate adaptation projects, and you know, there's probably 5 of those within certain plans that have already been discussed and yet never implemented. So there's some low-hanging fruit out there. This is something that, you know, talks about community activation and training and things of that nature. Let's just keep going. All right, so finally we get to pollution reduction and adaptive land use, and this is really about, I guess we do have one more chapter after this, zero waste, sorry. This talks about revitalizing contaminated properties, brownfields, otherwise known as, reducing pollution, and you know, these are again goals that we certainly support and would be involved in. I don't think there's anything terribly groundbreaking in this section, and again, we probably press for slightly more ambitious goals, but it's good to put on there. Okay, finally, is zero waste, and I know we have our Past Plastic Committee, and we have our Solid Waste Caucus, and other groups either within the Miami Group and the Sierra Club or that we are coalitioned with that are focused specifically on parts of this chapter. So the overall goal is to achieve 50% diversion of recyclable and other materials citywide by 2030 and zero waste by 2040, which sounds great. The question is, do we have the stomach to get ourselves there? So as you go down, you see that, you know, again, in this section, there are things like a recommendation to create a policy around single-use plastic items such as plastic bags, which of course we already have. It just needs to be implemented. And it doesn't specifically say that, but at least it's still in there as a goal of the plan. First, yes.
What question?
Oh, yeah.
The zero waste, is that, it sounds like it's related to the food issue, the waste from restaurants and groceries. Where does that?
Food waste absolutely factors into it. So food waste was also discussed in the food section, but there are a lot of parts of the plan that overlap or engage each other. And so, yes, food waste is a large part of the waste diversion puzzle, and getting organics out of the landfill.
Because restaurants just throw away a lot of food, and hospitals and nursing homes throw away a lot of food. I know that's an experience.
So scroll on down and let's see if there are already recommendations about, actually go back up one more, I'm so sorry. That's about recycling. Okay, so yeah, you can go down. So a lot of goals, of course, are about improving recycling rates. They could be better in Cincinnati, although there's a lot of progress that's been made over the years. They could definitely be better. More people can recycle more things. Yes, ma'am.
On the recycling, why don't we go back to the manufacturer? If you can't provide packaging that is recyclable, you can't sell it. You know, it's got to go back to the manufacturer, not to the person. You can't, you know, as hard as you try, you can't recycle. This, nobody can reuse it. So then it should be illegal to package something that you can't recycle.
So you're absolutely correct. And I'm trying to think about, I think, and again, if anyone's more expert in this, please let me know. But I think that primarily that conversation has happened on a state level, not necessarily here in Ohio, but at least in other states, because of course it's challenging for a city to tell a manufacturer what to do if they're, you know, national global manufacturer. That being said, we are home to Procter & Gamble and Kroger, so we actually do have a lot more buy into that particular topic than perhaps other cities of our size do. And so that is, I think that's, well, this is me personally, Nathan talking, not Sierra necessarily, but I would love to see us push for producer responsibility laws or regulations to the extent that the city can do that. let's follow up. So that's exactly, so I'm gonna wrap up here in just a minute, and then we can take other questions or comments, but that's exactly the kind of thing that I wanted us to start thinking about tonight. So where are there opportunities either in the plan or that the plan might even jog your brain to think about? Because again, just because something's not in the plan doesn't mean the city can't or won't do it. It just provides us sort of a handy framework. But as we're moving forward, the plan will get adopted in April. We'll all celebrate Earth Day. Then the question is, how do we make the rubber meet the road? And so I would love to see whether Marie, you want to do it during the conservation committee meetings, or whether there want to be, folks want to make subcommittees. But I would love to see us cherry pick several of the recommendations from the final plan that we would like to see move forward, and that we will commit. Obviously, we can't commit to making them happen because it might be the city decision. It might be a decision that only the city can make, but we can commit to at least advocating for it and being strong advocates. So let's try to spend some time after April doing that. Certainly, if anyone has questions about the draft plan that we just kind of zoomed through, feel free to follow up with me after tonight. And like I said, we've got, I doubt the plan will change much between now and when council votes on it, but you never know. It won't hurt to stop, or it won't hurt to keep trying. And so if folks have thoughts about this particular plan, I noticed some typos even, and that's why it's draft plan. That's why it's watermarked that way, because they don't want it to be.
Let's take maybe 2 minutes for, it's past 8 o'clock.
Yes,
2
questions,
minutes for
comments?
questions, or if there are questions from people that are in Zoom land.
Yes, while we're figuring the Zoom land out, I see Larry has his hand raised.
So one thing I wanted to do is give a quick shout out. I noticed one of the people in the Zoom audience is Janelle Schiller, who was the primary author of the original 2008 Green Cincinnati
Wow.
Plan. So Janelle, great to see you in the audience tonight.
That's awesome.
And
I hope
Nathan, I
I
was wondering whether this document that you just shared with us is publicly available yet.
So Larry, one of our members gave you that document. I don't know where he got it. It looks official, and it tracked all the other documents that I'd seen, so,
But it have to be official at some point,
so,
or only when the city council passes it.
no, so, okay, the planning commission has to review the document. And I believe that it's going to them they meet on Fridays. I think they meet on Fridays. I think it's going to them on St. Patrick's Day. So a week from this Friday. So theoretically, it'll be packaged and available for public review as well. But it'll have to be in there to this. We might have it sooner in a final form, but that'll be a look at it.
So you're not putting this out at this point available to us today.
Anyone can ask, again, Ralph is the owner of the document, so if you want to email Ralph and have him send it to you, I'm sure you want to do it. I don't want to circulate it only because I don't know its provenance. And so I don't want to be responsible for that, but I'm sure Ralph got it from somewhere good. Okay, I'm done. Guys, I'm done. Thank you all so very much. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for everyone on the computer.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for all the information.